All right, Unit 2, Chapter 7 is the American Revolution and creating a new nation. So, the American Revolution doesn't just win independence, it's going to launch this difficult process of building a new nation. So, the fighting is going to end in 1781 with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which is going to be when the United States is first recognized as the United States and also as free. But Americans are going to quickly discover that creating a government was a little bit harder than fighting the British. Okay, so by the mid 1770s, the relationship between the British and the colonists have collapsed. Events like the Boston Massacre, I said that weird, didn't I? Boston Massacre. Okay, Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party, they're going to show how far colonists are willing to go to resist what they consider unfair taxation. So we then have the Intolerable Acts, which are going to push the colonists past a breaking point. Parliament closes the Boston Harbor. It revokes Massachusetts charter, which that means the charter is the rules of the colony, and also Massachusetts worked. The charter was very economical, so they're going to lose a good part of their economic system, or they're going to attempt to lose it. It expands the Quartering Act through all the different colonies. British officials accused of crimes are going to have to be tried in England, which, of course, they'll get off. So all these different harsher measures, as the colonists see them, begin to terrify the colonists. The British are punishing Massachusetts. They're going to punish any colony even greater that steps out of line. So the colonists realized they need to act and act together. So in September of 1774, 12 colonists sent delegates to the Philadelphia for the first Continental Congress. Okay, so that's a representative from each colony, and this is kind of where they actually unify. So they're going to create the first Continental Congress, making them a unified political party action. Okay. The delegates organize boycotts of British goods, and they draft the Declaration of Rights, claiming colonists are entitled to all of the liberties of freed English subjects. So they're not necessarily at this point thinking of rebellion and complete separation from the British. They just want the same rights as the fellow Englishmen in England. Okay. So their argument is that Parliament could regulate trade only with colonial consent, but they could not neither tax nor legislate the colonies unless the colonies had a representative in Parliament. So they're quietly preparing for possible military action, but the Continental Congress doesn't declare independence at this time. They're not even really thinking about that. They just want to show that Britain no longer has complete control over the colonies. The colonies are not going to be isolated and divided. They're coming together as a unified front. And this new unified front will actually begin the end of the British rule in North America. All right, so from 1763 and 1765 to 1765, the relationship between the British colonies began to unravel. So it's important to remember that the colonists were not seeking independence at this time. They just want the rights of the Englishmen: liberty, representation, self government under the British Constitution. So when Parliament passed new taxes after the French and Indian War, colonists pushed back because they believed these laws violated the rights that they had already deserved, that they should just naturally have, being a British subject. But from the British perspective, Parliament was the guardian of liberty, and this is shaped by centuries of struggles through what is known as the Magna Carta and the Glorious Revolution. So, to the British, liberty was a collective right protected by the Parliament, and the Parliament had the authority to govern the entire empire as they saw fit. So, this fundamental disagreement sets the stage for the different conflicts, okay? So that's where you have, like we discussed before, the Parliament passes measures like the Stamp Act. The colonists resist through street protest, formal legislation actives, insisting that the Parliament couldn't regulate trade only with colonial consent, and they could not tax them without representation. So then you had the rebel groups like the Sons of Liberty. They're going to organize public protests, public boycotts. And then you had 1765, every colony is refusing to enforce the Stamp Act. Um, and you have the colonies insist that they receive the same rights as their natural born subjects of England. And all of this is stirring and going to get to the revolution. All right, so we talked about the first Continental Congress meeting and trying, again, they were not set on revolution, trying to work with the British Parliament, give them their grievance. So then you have in 1775, you have the Second Continental Congress. They're all going to send the same representatives and they're all going to meet. So the colonies were already on the brink of war, but they still hope for peace. But they're collective now. They've got to figure some things out. So they're going to create the Continental Army, and they choose George Washington as their commander. Okay, so they've got that going on just in case they go to war. They also have what they call the Olive Branch Petition. And what this is asking King George III to reconsider, to understand what they're trying to say. But the king is going to reject it. And on August 23rd, 1775, it is the king who declares that the colonies are in open rebellion. So he is the one who decides that the rebellion, they need to bow to us, and they're not. So this is going to be the official beginning of the American Revolution. So over the next year, you have public opinion, because you have people in the colonies. You're going to have a lot of people in the colonies who do not want to leave British rule. And then you have the other people who do. So you've got this mix of neighbors who do and don't. So the king saying that the colonies are now in official rebellion, it's going to mark the beginning. And then you have, over the next year, you have public opinion pushed Congress towards, saying they wanted independence. You have Thomas Paine, who creates this pamphlet called Common Sense, and it kind of convinces many of the colonists that they need to separate from British rule. And then in July 1776, the phrase United States of America appears in the Declaration of Independence. And on September 9th, Congress formally adopts the name of the United States. Now, the Declaration of Independence, as you know, is written by Thomas Jefferson. But it's not Thomas Jefferson's ideas. Thomas Jefferson would totally get in trouble with his teacher for plagiarism at this point, because he plagiarizes, he takes the Enlightenment ideas from John Locke. All right, so the Declaration argued that all people are born with natural rights. The government exists to protect those rights, and that the people may overthrow the government if the government becomes unjust and does not protect the natural rights. So it declared human equality, that there are a set of universal human rights, and the principle that the government must represent the people. So through these actions, the Second Continental Congress transforms a group of colonies into one nation. And then this nation is going to go to war based on um, these ideas. It's called a social contract, John Locke's social contract, that all are born equal. If you are naturally born, just breathing, you have natural rights. Um, and that is all from John Locke. All right, from 1774 and 1775, you have the relationship between the British and the colonies completely collapsed. Parliament refuses to compromise, colonial resistance is growing strong, and both sides prepare for conflict. So, General Thomas Gage, he's going to receive orders to seize weapons in Concord, and the colonists understood that the British were trying to disarm them. So on April 18th, 1775, Paul Revere and William Dawes, they ride through the countryside warning that the British troops were advancing, and they were going to be in Lexington the next morning. And this is where you have the first shots were fired. And that's kind of a famous thing, that the first shots were fired. So then the fighting begins and it spreads from Concord, and the British retreat to Boston under constant militia fire. And in June, the colonists fortify Bunker Hill, where the British won a battle, but fairly heavy losses. You have other different battles going on. Meanwhile, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia, and like I said, they have the Continental Army is strong and going. Um, you have on the other side, as soon as King George III declares the colonies an open rebellion, the British start cutting off American trade. They start seizing ships. They're going to hire Heisen, Hessian, from Germany. These are mercenaries these are German mercenaries, their own elite group that the British hired to come over into America and, use them. You're going to have Lord Dunmore. This again is British, and he's going to start offering freedom to enslaved people who join up with the British. Um, let's see, what else do you have going on at this point? You're going to have all different battles. A lot of that we're going to discuss deeper in class. The war is going to continue for years with different major turning points. One is Saratoga in 1777, and the other is Yorktown in 1781. 1781, this is where the British forces actually surrender, and the Treaty of Paris is done in 1783, and it recognizes America as being independent, and it also establishes the borders to the Mississippi River. Okay, it wasn't the entire country. We haven't gotten all that area yet. So these years mark a transition from protest to resistance to revolution and ultimately to nationhood. We're going to then see shaping of ideas and institutions that started back then at this time period that we're discussing and still define the United States today. Okay, just a few things about the difference the Patriots faced and disadvantages they faced. So, for the Patriots, their forces were poorly organized and largely untrained. We didn't have the Patriots are the American colonists. They had few cannons, limited gunpowder, no navy. They had little money and very small armies in numbers. But however, their advantage is they were skilled marksmen, and this is really how they win the war because they were outnumbered. Is these militia groups. Back at this time, you met at whatever field that you were going to have your battle. Everybody lined up facing each other. The first set shot, when they fell, the second group, the second lines stepped up. That was the British way of fighting. But you have in the Patriots, they were hunters, they knew the land, and what they're going to do is they're going to basically hunt the British. As the British are moving to wherever they're going to fight, they're going to be in the woods, taking them out. So, and then you have George Washington. He had the actual army that would go and meet the British on the battlefield. So the fact that the Patriots knew the land, they knew how to hunt, they knew how to get around, and they were fighting on their own soil, so they're fighting for their own land. And then you had the advantages for the British were that they were highly trained and experienced. Um, they had money, they had a navy, they had more troops, they had a surplus of funds. But the disadvantage is there's 3,000 miles between the United States and Europe. So they had a long travel. A lot of their supplies didn't arrive. They were constantly under attack by the colonists. So before, when you went to war, your battle didn't start till you arrived and we'll say a whistle was blown, but I don't think a whistle was really blown. But as they're trying to get to their battle, they're being attacked by colonists and caught off guard. So they had their own issues that they had to deal with. Okay, so when everything finally falls silent and the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783, obviously the Americans win, the United States becomes independent, the war is over, but you then now have building a country. You have no government system. Okay, so you have alliances that have been fractured. You have the new question of how do you build a government that reflects these revolutionary ideas of liberty and equality and justice for all? And who does liberty and equality actually apply to? And this question of John Locke's social contract that they based the Declaration of Independence on, of every man being born free, we'll just talk about men. Is this the black man too? Is this the Native American man? And those questions are going to be fought all the way into the Civil War. If we are founded on a country of every natural born, anyone born, doesn't say anything about color, who all are we talking about that are born free with the same rights? And as we know from our history, the black man does not receive the same rights as the white man, neither does the Native American man receive the same rights as the white man. Okay, now let's talk about women, right? So women are going to play a huge role in fighting for freedom. They're going to lead boycotts. They're going to organize protests. They're going to manage the farm and businesses as their men go off to fight. They're going to defend their homes. But do they have freedom? They don't have freedom. They can't even become citizens. Okay. And then, of course, you have the issue of slavery. Um, we know that enslaved people are still enslaved because we haven't gotten to the Civil War yet. So you have a country that is built on all of these ideas, but now has to figure out how do you apply those ideas that were built on to everybody? Were they even applied to everybody? I would say no. I would say they were only applied to the white man. Okay, so then you also are going to have some expansion. You're going to have new territories, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This is going to become a very important law of this era. What it does is it establishes governance for the Northwestern Territory. It outlines how new states would be admitted and guaranteed that new states would enter into the Union on equal footing with the original 13 colonies. Okay. At the same time, you also have what is called loyalists. Loyalists were American colonists that lived in the colony, but they fought for the British. So now what do we do with all these people? Okay. Are they going to remain loyal to the crown? So you have about 15 to 20% of the white population, which at this time would be roughly 500,000 people. They're going to end up having to leave the United States after the war. A lot are going to flee to Canada, back to Britain, or to the West Indies. So, remarkably, their departure did not involve any mass trials, executions, or any type of widespread violence. Many loyalists came from, the upper classes of society. And when they left, they're going to create this power vacuum that is going to allow new American leaders to rise up quickly now that they're gone. They're no longer in power. So it's going to change the idea of who holds power, classes in society. Then you have the economy, which is in really bad shape at this point. War disrupted production and trade, right? You had at the very beginning the British taking over any type of ships coming in. You have inflation, you have profiteering. Some merchants are ruined while others gain wealth and influence. You have this sense of inequality. You have frustration. You have mob actions in some of these cities. And then you have taxation, right? Like we said, governments have to tax to get the money to run the government. So this is a very sensitive issue, obviously, because the revolution was sparked on resistant taxation. Uh, so you have built from the Continental Congress um, this structure of government, right? It's the Continental Congress. But this Congress has no authority to directly tax the people. It can print money, but without enough backing, the money is just worthless. Um, so you have a new nation that is independent, economically unstable. Challenges that are going to shape this early republic are different things like the Article of Confederation. It's not going to be strong enough to do what needs to be done to create what we know now as the United States. You have the Treaty of Paris, and this is the birth of the United States. So there is a lot more that still needs to be done. Like I said, some of the first government documents that they create, like the Continental Congress and the, oh, what is it? My mind went blank. Um, you have the revolution, you have the fighting, of course, within North America, so you have damage there. You have a nation that's trying to create a new identity. You have an economy that needs to be rebuilt, a country that needs to rebuild. You will have the issue of defining what citizenship is. That will go all the way to the Civil War. But the main thing we're going to look at next is how does the government construct itself, the government, the laws, with these ideas of liberty, equality, and self rule.